boards have decided to address these things. And so it's, it's difficult to get over that hump, but that combined with inflation has really seen a lot of these costs increase. I want to acknowledge though as well that using grants, in-house staff where we can, all the resourcefulness of staff has kept the costs down from where they could have been, and other things were just out of our control. So that, and similarly with staffing, we had an actual organizational assessment that characterized the inadequacies in some areas of our staffing, and we're trying to bring that up to a standard that is what we would expect to see in our administration and our all throughout our township staff areas. So again, that was done through an organizational assessment, and so it's it's very strategic how those things were decided upon. So I'll just thank the staff again, Jennifer for coming. If there's no other board comment, and I'll give the board one more chance before we go to public comment.
I think in addition to that, of course, coupled with, and I always get this wrong, the Department of Community and Economic Development Strategic Management Planning Program, when you think about the strategies that we're going to be outlining in the future, I think we're in a good, good footing right now, and we'll be even on a better footing as we have, outside folks in here helping us do the job that our taxpayers deserve. So,
great.
Thank you. Sure.
Yeah, all great comments, and I like the DCD grant. That I think is one tool that we'll be able to use to look at the long-term sustainability of our finances. I know that was one priority of my predecessor who was elected 4 years ago, and I continue to share that sentiment of keeping us on a good fiscally sustainable path.
Thank you. Okay, other comments before we go to public comment? Not seeing any. So we'll first go to public comment in the room. If anyone has any public comment. And I'm not seeing any in the room, so we'll go to the online attendees. And I see one hand raised, Mark Kunkel, if you would give us your full name and township of residence. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback on the draft 2024 township budget. This was a challenging budget to review due to the new format and review process the board undertook. Last Thursday, October 26th, only 4 days ago, the board completed its review of a $28 million budget. Tonight, the board is preparing to adopt the proposed budget, and I question what's the rush. Historically, the proposed budget is adopted in early December, followed by a final budget adoption. I'd like to suggest the board delay adopting the proposed budget until November 21st, with the adoption of the final budget at its first meeting in December. Why am I asking for this? First, the 2024 COG budget has yet to be adopted. So there may be changes to that budget that may impact the township's budget. 4 days is hardly a sufficient amount of time for a review of the changes made to the draft budget. And there's been hardly any public awareness made of the 2024 budget. Will the board consider delaying adopting the proposed budget until November 21st?
Okay, and if that concludes your comments, we'll move to other.
Well, I'm asking you a question. I'm hoping that the board would take time to answer that.
Well, I was going to correct you that we're actually just authorizing for public hearing at this meeting.
The agenda indicated that you'd be adopting the draft budget this evening with a adoption, and the schedule shows that it would be adopted on November 21st. If I misunderstood that, I apologize.
Right, I'm not sure what you're reading. So there are, Yeah, we'll be approving it tonight and then moving toward a public hearing for adoption.
The final adoption on the 21st.
Correct.
And I'm asking, would you consider delaying the adoption of the proposed budget this evening until November 21st and adoption of the final budget the first meeting in December, so that there's more than 4 days of review time on this budget?
I think I'm just a little bit uncertain of your reference to the 4 days.
October 26th was Thursday.
No, that was a week ago, a week and 4 days ago.
Yeah.
I apologize. It's my correction, your correction, thank you. Well, absent the delay, then I do have a few comments. A quick review of the proposed 2024 budget. There are several things of note. Many of the notes for the line items have not been amended based on the board's final determination at its October 26th meeting. So those notes in the notes column are exactly the same as they were under the draft budget. 4 of the funds have incorrect fund balances: the Stormwater Fund, the Capital Reserve Fund, the Transportation Improvement Fund, and the Police Pension Fund. And I'll be glad to provide information on that if you request. But those fund balances for the ending of 2024 are incorrect. The Fire Hydrant Fund continues to have a growing fund balance. This is an enterprise fund. An enterprise fund should have essentially a very close relationship between revenues and expenditures. They're not intended to have large cash reserves. So I'm hoping that the board will be considering either eliminating or reducing substantially the fire hydrant assessment for this upcoming year in order to lower that fund balance in the fire hydrant reserve, or fire hydrant fund. And finally, just a clarification, hopefully the board can answer this. There's a 100% increase in the solicitor services in 2024. Can anyone answer whether if this increase is due to the township's participation in the solar purchase agreement and the ongoing cost to prepare the contracts for that program? And that's account 01-400-404.310. Just wondering whether or not those services, those legal services, include the township's share of participating in the solar purchase agreement and the ongoing legal cost.
Thank you. And if that concludes your comments, I think we can address some of these. I'll go to the manager first, or I can address them however you prefer.
Thank you. So I would just acknowledge that the beginning and ending fund balances were done by Jennifer Steigelman, our finance consultant, and James and I reviewed the comments. And I don't recall the board directing staff to make any changes to the comments in the budget. I do recall Mr. Kunkel making his comment during citizen input. Some of the comments that he shared were reviewed, considered, and some were amended. And I'll look to the assistant township manager if he wants to make comments based on any amendments that he made. But I trust that he did give consideration and made amendments where necessary. And the 4th item, I will just acknowledge, it's coming to me. I think what was the 4th item?
Legal.
Oh, thank you. So it's, as you know, COG has their own legal consultant, and there is a established, I believe it's $30,000 that have been paid by the district. And while the township certainly may need to contribute in the future, or be asked to contribute additional funds, at this time, the allocation or appropriation in the budget for the township solicitor's fee is based on this year's, and there were some, I would say, unexpected additional cost, as you are aware and have been discussed in exec session. And so we've just built out based on historical billing. Hopefully we don't have to use it, but better to have it there and budgeted rather than not have enough and not be able to seek legal consultation as needed.
Thanks, and we'll likely have an update on that. And I think the last increase in our legal fees for that were around $2,500, $1,500, something like that. So, and I do believe possibly in November we might have a discussion item on that with some updated information. Yeah, I would just kind of reinforce what the manager has said in the notes column, that as discussed at the budget meetings, that information was ported over from the existing budget formatting, and so not all of that had been updated. And what we noted was, as we continue to build out that the new software and that format of it, we'll be able to continue updating those. Certainly there may be some things in there that, you know, we could take a look at before the final presentation, but nothing that would substantially impact anything. It was just notes on some different items. And again, as we discussed during the budget meetings, due to this using this new software, this new format, and having these different categorizations of our funds, which better reflect how our audit actually reflects these funds, is going to take a while to reconcile. And that was kind of fully discussed at the budget meeting. So that was acknowledged that there will take time to get those fund balances reconciled. It was difficult, you know, to maneuver some of this. It's hard to wrap your head around some of these big changes. I understand. So.
Thank you, and I'll just also note that some of the comments that Mr. Kunkel shared, particularly about the hydrants, I think are all good for us as staff to note. And then once we do begin that assessment from DCD, the Strategic Management Planning Program, these are all good, these are all areas that I have no doubt that they'll assess all of our funds and identify what, if any, changes that they're making, recommendations or requiring us to change based on legislation.
Great, okay. All right, if there's no other board discussion, didn't see any other public comment, I will look for a motion.
I'll move that the Board of Supervisors authorize advertisement of a public hearing on a resolution to approve the Ferguson Township 2024 draft annual operating budget. And this was Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. Is there a second?
This is Patty, I'll second.
Thanks. Any additional discussion? And if done, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Thank you. And with that, I'll just take a minute to, again, as I did at the wrap-up of our second budget session, to thank the board for their efforts, their time that they've invested in this, but to really spend some moments thanking staff, thanking Jennifer, who's present here and I know has been a big help, and in particular to Township Manager Centrise Martin, Assistant Manager James Progart, who have gone above and beyond to not only present this budget, but to lead the township into the use of a new modern program and format that's going to help the township for a long time. So much appreciated. It's noted, and thank you again.
I just want to say thank you to all of you. The goals and objectives that you've set forth in prioritizing financial resiliency. I mean, that ultimately is what drives staff to move in any one direction. And so the submission of the DCD grant, for example, is a direct result of your desire for financial resiliency. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there's nothing else on this, we will move on to authorization for well, this is not a public hearing, actually. Oh, no, this is for the strategic plan. Sorry, I was jumping ahead. Authorization for advertisement for public hearing on a resolution to adopt the 2023 strategic plan update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll keep this brief. Provided with the agenda packet is the draft resolution with the with the 2023 strategic plan update included as Exhibit A for review and authorization for advertisement to hold a public hearing for the board's consideration. And it's been discussed and reviewed and discussed and reviewed, and I'm happy to recommend that we move forward with a public hearing to adopt by resolution the 2023 strategic plan update.
All right, comments, discussion on the strategic plan? Not seeing anything. All right, if there's no other discussion, I will take a motion.
Yes, this is Matt. I'll go ahead and make a motion that the Board of Supervisors move to approve the draft 2023 strategic plan and authorize advertisement for a public hearing on a resolution to adopt the plan on November 21st, 2023.
This is Patty, I'll second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. All right, thank you. Okay, we'll move to new business. First up is the consent agenda with a number of items. Did anyone need to remove any item for discussion? And if not, I'll take a motion to approve.
This is Patty, motion to approve the consent agenda is,
Is there a second?
This is Corey, I second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, say no. All right, thank you. Okay, we'll move now to discussion on conditional use application for all other commercial uses, and we'll go to Ms. Wargo.
Thank you. Provided in the agenda is an application for a conditional use permit from BDC Holdings, Inc. for 3610 West College Avenue. This is 24004-079H, submitted to the Planning and Zoning Department August 21st, 2023. The applicant is requesting conditional use approval for a 3,000 square foot outdoor self-storage pad for the proposed 85,423 square foot self-service storage facility. So this property is located in general commercial zoning district, and it is currently the property 130,680 square feet. So the Ferguson Township zoning ordinance 27205.13 general commercial allows for conditional uses to be permitted for all other commercial uses on lots with a minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet. An outdoor self-storage facility is considered to be a commercial use. Upon review by township staff and planning commission, the proposed use is meeting the conditional use criterion provided for in 2720513 and 27704 outdoor storage within supplemental regulations. Therefore, approval of the conditional use permit is being recommended. Some of the board members may recall back when we did our comprehensive update in 2019, we included this provision within the general commercial and a similar one in the industrial district, recognizing that these districts were permitted of intense uses. And it was really to be that catch-all for new and upcoming uses to keep up on planning trends. So I do want to remind the board, a use permitted by conditional use is expressly permitted in our zoning ordinance. However, it's subject to a hearing and a decision, in this case for the governing body. So it's really the function of the board is to determine if what is proposed is meeting the express criteria that we have provided for in our ordinance, and if it is consistent with the public interest as expressed in the specific standards established in the commercial zoning district. We also have the consultants here from Sully Engineering that they are doing the land development plan, so we recognize the board hasn't seen this plan yet. It's still under review for stormwater traffic and whatnot, so they are prepared to sort of give a walkthrough of this plan as they did for Planning Commission, just so everyone really understands what the proposed use is. It is a permitted use. So we have Chris here with Sully as well. And James, can you make sure he can share his screen?
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Jenna, for that introduction. My name is Chris Pulowski. I'm a licensed civil engineer with Solely Engineering. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, BDC Holdings, Inc. We're here before you tonight for a conditional use permit application. I know your time is limited, so I'll keep this as brief as possible. Can you all share or see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. So we're seeking conditional use permit application for our 3,000 square foot outdoor storage area in the rear of our self-storage building that we're proposing. The address is 3610 West College Avenue. So on the screen here, you'll see this is West College Avenue on the side of the screen. And then we're proposing 2 drives, one here and one located here. There's an 85,423 square foot multi-level indoor climate controlled self-storage facility that's proposed for this lot. You'll travel down to the rear of the site and you'll notice there's a 3,000 square foot outdoor storage area. That is what we are seeking the conditional use application for. It'll be surrounded by a 4-foot high fence. There's a number of plantings and screenings on both sides of the facility. There's also a large natural buffer to the rear that's to remain. There's farmland to the rear out here. There's commercial uses to the north, and then this is a residential use to the south that I believe is also for sale at this time. The reason we're here for conditional use is outdoor storage, as Jenna mentioned, is not listed as a specific use in the zoning regulations. So this is the avenue that we are pursuing. The types of items that'll be stored in this outdoor storage area really are going to be limited to cars, boats, trailers, and RVs. Everything that's going to be registered. There's not going to be any hazardous chemicals or anything really of that nature. In the area, there's a significant amount of car dealerships, so perhaps we can work on an agreement, or the applicant work on an agreement with them to store some of their extra cars here. But again, that's really the intended use of this outdoor storage area. And again, before you tonight, we're only seeking the conditional use permit. We will be back in the coming months to seek final approval for the entire site as a whole, including the main 85,000 square foot self-storage facility. So with that, there's 18 parking spaces. The area is accessed by 2 gates. Again, it's kind of tucked away in the back here. There's screening on all the sides. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have, and I can show you a few more plans if interested.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just go back to Jenna if you had anything else to add before we take questions from the board.
I have nothing else to add. Chris really covered it all.
Thank you. All right. Discussion.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm just curious about the pad material. What are we talking about? I don't think I saw that in the write-up.
Yeah, so thank you. Good question. So the majority of the site is going to be bituminous concrete or asphalt essentially, and then this the self-storage pad itself, or the outdoor storage, will also be made of asphalt. It'll be a continuation of the pavement, essentially surrounded by the fence for an extra security measure.
Great, thank you. My concern, of course, is environmentally seeing some vehicles that get parked on grass and, gravel, et cetera, that may not be the most fit for the road, and having something like bituminous underneath them and concrete makes a lot of sense. So thank you for that. I'm just curious.
Thank you. Good question.
Okay, other comments and discussion, questions? Not seeing any, so if someone would care to make a motion.
I, Mr. Thompson, will move that the Board of Supervisors grant the conditional use permit for 3610 West College Avenue, Stack and Store to permit an outdoor storage area on TP 24004-079A0000.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yeah, this is Matt, I'll second.
Thanks. Other discussion? And I'll just note, back to Jenna's point about the zoning rewrite, that is why this was made conditional then, because knowing, just stating the any other uses was very broad. And so the Planning Commission had a lot of discussion about how to manage those unknown requests, but keep the decision-making ability. So thank you for pointing that out. And again, we'll see the full plan at a different point. So if there's no other discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. All right, thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we will move to discussion on the 2024 Draft Center Region Council of Governments Summary Budget. And we'll go to the manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And provided within the agenda packet is I should say actually provided with the agenda is the narrative introducing the 2024 Draft Center Region Council of Governments Summary Budget. We also have with us this evening the Center Region Council of Governments Executive Director Eric Nordenberg and Finance Director Kimberly McCollum. And I will yield the floor to both of them.
Thanks. And I'll invite Mr. Norberg up to the podium to give us some opening comments.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, staff, and good to see you again, Jennifer. Just wanted to start with a few opening remarks, and then I have a number of colleagues from the COG here, as was noted. Our new Finance Director, Kimberly McMullen, is here. James Saylor from Center County MPO. Christy Owens is online as well. So we have several staff that can help answer questions. But let me start by just commenting about where we've been since about a year ago. Following the last budget cycle, improvements were discussed and implemented for the 2024 preparation of the budget, and these things included an updated schedule, new guidelines to follow that would limit the average growth of municipal shares, that would fund the baseline budget of the COG. And our goal tonight was, and through this process, was to deliver a budget that is both responsible and equitable and meets the priorities established earlier this year by the COG through input from all of the municipalities. The changes that were put into place earlier this year resulted in a capital improvement program and a program plan document preparation and review that was a month and a half or 2 months earlier than the usual schedule. And as you are all aware, we have had a number of staff changes that interrupted or had impact on the whole budget process. So fortunately, we have new staff that are here, that have been involved and know the process much better than for next year than they have when they came in to their jobs this year. And so we were really fortunate that we've had some time and some patience and grace from elected officials and staff of the municipalities so that we could get through this year's budget process. And I think we did overall very well, all things considered. One of the benefits of the cycle next year will be that we have all of the new ideas and input from staff who were involved this year, learned a lot of things, discovered things along the way, and as we move into next year, things will be even better. But I want to once again thank everybody for their patience as we worked through the process this year with staff who were either new or new to their responsibilities and roles. But first I want to remark about the guideline. The budget guideline for this year was set to cover what I call the baseline budget, continuing the current level of service from 23 into 24, plus the COLA for staff, as well as merit increases and other costs for delivering the same level of services. We worked hard to stay within that guideline, and that guideline, using a formula established by the Finance Committee, was set to just over 8%, actually 8.05%. Within that guideline, we were able to cover the costs of market adjustments, including those from the classification and compensation study within that limit. Other requests were then reviewed by the Finance Committee, and some are now included in the summary budget as a result of several weeks of review, and those are listed on page 11 of the summary budget, as well as the other information that was provided to you. With those added initiatives, the average increase in municipal shares is now at 10.68%. Also, as shown on page 11 of the summary budget, is a recommendation that was not in the summary budget, but is now one that we're requesting be included, and that is the funding for the CCMPO staff and consulting that could pursue federal funding through the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. I handed out to each of you a page showing that information for the recommendation that came from the Finance Committee. Looks like this. The last item on that page, the last line, says summary budget requested addition for $189,000. That was discussed by the Finance Committee, and after being reviewed over the course of a number of months and reduced in scope a couple of times that you see earlier on that page, the request from the Finance Committee is to add the funding for the transportation grant specialist for 3/4 of the year, a reduced amount for consulting in $100,000, and then these items, that dollar amount was shown on your handout, breaking out the amount by municipality based on the formula for the MPO. So that would be $22,899 impact on the township. So with that overview and summary, I will turn things back over to you, Madam Chair, as you are the representative from the township to the Finance Committee, and you may have other comments to add about the Finance Committee review, and then my colleagues and I will be happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Okay. I thought what might be easiest, if anyone has any initial comments, I'll take those. And then I thought what might work is to refer to page 8 of the summary budget. This has the summary of proposed receipts for 2024. So it goes by fund, and then we can identify Ferguson Township's contribution. And I didn't see it in here, but is there a summary of by township of expenditures by agency or by fund? So that if that's not in here, I guess I would add that as a comment. That's been in budgets previously, and
I will double check.
thanks. So that, and I can provide the example for that if needed. It kind of has 2 townships per page and goes through each one and describes. It's just the information is here for the past 2 years. That summary might go back for a 3rd year to include that. I'm not sure. We could use this here. It just makes it a little bit more user friendly. So our task is to provide comments back to COG on this budget that worked its way through finance. There is the one specific question about CCMPO, and we'll get to that. So essentially, if everyone refers to page 8, there aren't too many items, and I can just point out as we move along maybe how we got to that number, what's new, what's added, and I'll look to the staff in the room to compensate for my explanations. We had 2, 3 very, very long, thorough meetings with all of the agency staff representatives, and worked through a lot of spreadsheets trying to, in real time, look at the changes in expenditures and how that would impact the bottom line of the municipal share percentage increase. So, so that being said, I guess we could just start, the first line is parks operating. You can see that's gone up from 475,000 some to 530, roughly. There are new staff positions in there. Is that still the case? That would be a
Correct,
question.
and those changes are listed on page 11, associated with those ads. In particular, there's a shared staff assistant that would be shared between Parks Operating and the Active Adult Center, and then there is a part-time position to help with the seasonal maintenance at Whitehall Road Regional Park.
So the part-time, is that in here somewhere? Is that indicated that?
It's not on the list, not
Okay.
on the 11, it was included before we got to the finance review, because it was kind of an essential thing to help maintain that park.
Okay, because we did review that
Correct.
separately when we did the Parks Agency.
It was discussed, yes, but
Okay.
it was not one of the add or delete items that we talked about when we got to that point.
And I guess that would be a comment that I would propose, and we'll get consensus on comments as we go along before we conclude, so that we're all in agreement. One comment I would suggest is when the summary budget was, or the detailed budget was presented to the Finance Committee, between the time it was provided to us and discussion, or the overview meetings, some items were pulled out for discussion and some were left in. And I can give some other examples of that as we move along. So how those decisions were determined, I'd like to investigate that a little bit more deeply, so that the Finance Committee has more input on what is included and what's separately discussed. We discussed everything line by line, but in the totals that were provided, some items were already included. So you would see, if I can give examples, if that's not clear, but some items were add-ons that we were meant to consider, some were included. And so the process getting up to what's naturally going to be, or what's originally going to be included, and what do we decide on separately, I think needs to be explored a little bit, and I'll let Eric speak to that.
Sure. For those of you who aren't aware, we have a very manual process for developing and preparing the budget right now using Excel spreadsheets. And so part of the difficulty was the time crunch and the new staff that were involved and such in the process. And as a result, there wasn't, the development of the budget included the requested items until we could identify where we stood relative to the guideline. And once we knew we had items that would not fit within the guideline, everything was in so that we could calculate and balance. Once we knew where the guideline stood, we start identifying the things that would come back out, so that what we would have recommended to the Finance Committee was a balanced budget at or below the guideline. So there were a number of items that had to come out, but there wasn't time to go through manually through all of those spreadsheets and delete them and then potentially put them back in. So ideally, by next summer, we'll have new budget software like the township is looking at, and this will be a much more smooth process next year. So again, we appreciate your patience and understanding that we're just dealing with lack of hours in the day for all of the staff that were involved in some of these changes.
So thanks for that, and I think that will be helpful, the new software for that. So when you say that the guideline, you're trying to abide by the guideline, so were you doing that by department or by agency or overall? Because if it's overall, I guess that's my question, is why would some things get pulled out and not?
So it was overall. So the guideline applies to the level of increase for municipal shares overall for all of COG. So back to where you looked at page 8, That shows, I think, let's see, sorry. The initial guideline would have been at the bottom of the center column where it says 10.68% now. That would have been where that 8.05 was before the Finance Committee additions were back in. So that's that 10.68 is the average of all of the municipality increases shown there across the bottom row there to the right of that. So we were looking at that on an average across all agencies that receive municipal funding, and that's where we were, you know, some might be a little bit above, some might be a little bit lower.
Understood. Okay, thanks. So I guess a comment I would suggest would be to go back and look at the prioritization exercise that we did last year. We put public safety on top, taking care of what we have, and I don't want to try to restate the list in order that it was identified, but we went through an exercise where we prioritized where we wanted spending to occur at COG, and public safety was at the top. So that, you know, there was staffing for, say, parks, for instance, left in, but not, you know, some accommodation left in for, say, CCMPO trying to get the grants for road infrastructure. So that's my comment, is how is that chart of prioritization used in deciding what gets in and what's pulled back out for the Finance Committee and then for the municipalities to discuss. So, okay, so when we talked about the park staff, our board had talked about that and was in favor of the part-time help at Whitehall Road Regional Park. One position was really just converted at Millbrook Marsh, so it was essentially a wash. I think there was a couple $1,000s in increase between the staff position and janitorial. And then the active adult center position, and then the other additional staff position. I wasn't in favor of that, so I was in the minority of how that moved forward, and you can see that the staff position is in here. So I guess I would comment that I would still like to not include that additional park staff position. Now go to Jeremy, you look like you wanna.
So you said you were not in favor of that.
Correct.
Okay. And this might be just more of a general comment that I have, but looking at the fiscal sustainability of the township and understanding that we do pay a large portion for parks to COG, and here is an instance where it seems like even though we're not in favor of another expense, we've been overruled. But I think it's just how will we address that challenge going forward? Because one thing that is in our draft strategic plan and our residents are looking for is for us to maintain a level of sustainability fiscally moving forward. And I know, Patty, you've really done a lot of, going to bat for us, in parks governance, looking at solutions and ways that we can keep our parks fiscally sustainable.
Yeah, I'd agree with that comment. I'd add too that there's leftover money from the food truck approval that Patty had brought up, because they're gonna now purchase carts instead of the food trucks. There was a surplus there. And if that isn't just returned to the municipalities, then could that help fund, even though I normally oppose the use of one-time funds for recurring expenses, was there something proposed here in parks that could offset, and maybe that would be the Whitehall Road position, so that, that part-time position, that would cover that for a number of years, and then maybe by that point, it would be a full-time position, depending on how the park evolves. So that would be a second comment, would be use of the food truck
Yeah, that's.
over, or excess that won't be used to cover some of this additional expense, specifically the Whitehall Road position. So, so that, let me check my notes, see if was there anything else on parks? You know, and I guess just to, you know, Jeremy's point again, because Millbrook Marsh is listed separately on here, so I guess just to note too, you know, Millbrook Marsh,
Yeah.
the Nature Center operating is $74,000 a year for the township.
What, and how come we end up sometimes being the highest payer, even though our population's smaller than, a little bit smaller than the borough, but also an asset like the marsh? Is it frequent by as many Ferguson Township residents as it is maybe College Township residents or State College Borough residents?
I think that's a great point. You know, it all comes back to the formula, but, you know, does the formula really apply to Millbrook Marsh, which is a regional park, but not in the same sense that the others are, which are all included in a certain funding arrangement that's, you know, that we're all contributing to. So it is different, and it has its own funding line too. So is that something that we can separately address, is the funding for Millbrook Marsh? Yeah, I'd agree with that comment. And we'll just keep adding comments until.
Yeah, I've brought that up previously,
Yep.
right? That I don't agree that Millbrook Marsh should be treated the same way as the parks. I think the whole point of having the regional park system that we have is that, especially now with Whitehall coming online, that our townships have a regional park that is close to them, and so the access is equitable to those things. And so I brought it up previously that I think that we need to revisit how we fund Millbrook Marsh, particularly with the capital asks that are coming up in the near future.
Yeah, I would agree with, yeah, with all of that.
Yeah. I would also add, since you had mentioned about the food cart, I believe in general forum, I even expressed that I'm not necessarily a fan of us getting into things that maybe aren't within our wheelhouse and level of expertise. Like the parks program is not a full service restaurant. Nothing wrong with having snacks at a park or a pool, but like
Right,
not necessarily a top priority.
right. When the prioritization show we want to take care of what we have, yeah, I think that would be a note as well, you know, that we're not prioritizing. I'll look for consensus too, food trucks or food carts at the pools. You know, if something has to go, I would put that at the top.
And I do remember that they had a survey, if you will, and they did talk about, the residents did talk about the importance of having food and being, and I appreciate that. But then I also remember a number of comments, and, you know, that were saying, oh, please don't take away our ability to bring in our own food as well. And then
yeah.
there was a discussion that, like, it's great to be able to purchase things when we're there, but we certainly don't want to be forced to buy what is there. We still like to bring our own snacks,
Right.
et cetera.
Right.
And the carts will be a grill too. There's a grill on, so I think it was also a question of what actually is going to be provided and how, if you're providing something, you need to be covering a lot of bases to make it equitable. So do we really want to go down that road at this point? So good comments. If there's anything else on parks operating, I'm not seeing anything. So we'll go to fire operating. And as I had mentioned last time, this increase is not seen this year because it's being covered by fund balance, and I'll look to Eric to correct me if I'm missing something in that, but then next year we will see the increase that is coming from the additional 4 positions shared with code.
Right.
Okay, so, so that's why you actually see, I think it's actually a little bit of a decrease, am I right? So that there, and again, you know, the comment that was made earlier about this is, there was really universal support for adding these positions at the Finance Committee, and so having had that initially incorporated into this budget would have made a lot of sense. I think it would have saved a lot of steps in the Finance Committee overview, and we really tried to bring the number down actually on what that expenditure is going to be, knowing that those positions won't get hired in January. So they were funded for 8 or 9 months. I think that might have been 9 months instead of the full 12. So that brought down the total in the expenditures on that. But, you know, we, again, just to say, you know, we really could have saved a little bit of time there. So, and I'll point out, we'll take public comment at the end after we've gotten through some of these items. We have a lot to work through.
I just,
Go
a
ahead.
comment I want to make about that too is that I would also like to just congratulate the staff on the thinking outside of the box about those positions for that. And I'm grateful for that sort of thinking. So I wanted to throw a little love, you know, not be, so.
Yeah, and to, you know, and just to say, there's 4 positions being added. They're gonna be shared with code, pretty much 50-50, I think, and that's how the numbers work too.
Yeah.
The reason it works so well for fire is because of the need to cover so many shifts and hours throughout the week, and so you can't just hire one person. They would only be there, you know, for their hours, so you'd still have all these gaps. So, so absolutely, that did make sense, and again, I think there's still full support for that. So, but you know, just a point, that will be an increase, a significant increase next year. I think Ferguson Township's share of fire operating, I want to say, is at about 30%. And if that increase was at 236 before it was reduced, you know, we're essentially a third of that. So, and whatever increases would come with those salaries for next year can be added on. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, anything else on fire or emergency management? We'll go to planning. There was a lot of discussion about local planning as part of the planning agency, and there is a new director coming on board, and you know, he'll have a new set of senior planners, so they'll be able to I think better assess where they're at the start of next year with staffing. I don't know if you have anything new to touch on with local planning, or.
The one thing to note is that as you noted, the new planning director will start on the 20th. He's helping out remotely with screening interviews to fill the vacancies that we have right now, the
Okay.
senior planner and principal planner. But there will be savings that are reflected on page 11, and so that's why there is a dip in that. But you know, I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about the local and regional planning program for 2024.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think those positions are getting filled. I think, you know, it's nice to offer local planning as a service. There's been a lot of time spent on evaluating this service, so if it doesn't just kind of work itself out initially early next year, I think I would be supportive of ending that program. It's a lot of investment from anyone who serves on any of those committees and the finance committee to kind of evaluate where all that stands, and we don't participate in that. So I would kind of let that go back to the municipalities themselves who are utilizing that service. So I guess that would be a comment I'd suggest, would be to, you know, I'd be in favor of dropping that local planning if it isn't, I guess, better separated from regional. It's a lot, it's a lot for any other township to manage when they're not involved. Comment?
So if I'm correct, Patton has dropped out of that, or will be dropping out of that. And I think Half Moon, they didn't drop out completely, but reduced some of their participation. So that's one of those that is kind of making me think, well, if everyone's doing planning separately, or that seems to be the way we're going, you know, why are we holding on to, you know, both that, you know, it's almost kind of questioning, should we maybe reinvent the model?
That's my tendency too, and so I think maybe them all looking into sharing somebody that's really, you know, disassociated from CRPA, I think might be a better use of time.
Guess maybe like a model like the State College Borough Police Department, they share
Where they
with
contract out,
different,
yeah.
because obviously, like I think Harris and Half Moon that do use that, they're gonna still need planners from time to time. It's just already better through this program or through a neighboring municipality or consultant.
So, if nothing else, I'm planning CCMPO is the question specifically that we were asked to address. So, we'll just go back to that sheet is still on the screen. So, if at this reduced scope, we're funding the transportation grant specialist at 75%, and then adding consulting support at $100,000. So this reduces the number of federal applications, possibly, you know, I'd say possibly. And I'll invite Jim Saylor, Director of the MPO, to come up at any point if there's anything you want to share on this as we enter into that discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, my name's Jim Saylor. I'm the Principal Transportation Planner over at the CRPA, working with the CCMPO. So yes, with this proposal, what we think we can do is bring a full-time position on to oversee the program. As you pointed out earlier, this was another one of the positions where we assessed how long it would take to bring someone into the role and get them up and running. With this, we would, for this first year, we'd be hoping to get them in the seat by April 1st. So it's 3/4 of the year that's included. From talking with other planning partners that have worked in this type of program, we do think a hybrid approach is necessary, that due to the breadth of programs, the wide variety of different projects that you can pursue funding for, we do perceive the need for assistance from a consulting team with a deep bench, someone who can provide on-demand bridge experts, safety experts, people who can help us with a design that will reduce the vulnerability to extreme weather events or whatever other programs that we find most likely to be funded with our applications. I did want to touch on, as part of evaluating this and bringing this proposal together, again, this all goes back to direction from the Center County MPO when they saw the funding that was resulting from the bipartisan infrastructure law, and they saw the increase that resulted on the tip from the formulary programs, and realized that, wow, another 40% of that is locked up behind these discretionary programs. We have projects that year after year we cannot find a way to move forward. So this is intended to be a tool to allow us to go through our backlog, to prioritize what's out there against the available opportunities, and make rational decisions about what's most likely to be successful and what we can advance. So we're asking for the resources, almost as a proof of concept, to try and bring together 1 to 2 federal applications per year. As the opportunities present, we may be able to assist other sponsors with strengthening their applications for other programs, but that would be the core of what we're offering with this proposal.
Thanks so much for that. And I would say, first, it's for the consultant, that's an allowance. And so that would be as needed, that would be
Up to.
used. Yes, and so that will be used if it's needed, you know, if there's, so it's not necessarily just signing that away. And, you know, all these county projects impact us. And so I would say, one way specifically for Ferguson that I could see this being helpful is with the active transportation plan and looking at some of those connections we want to see, having somebody there to be able to go out and find those grants could really help us. There are other ways too, but that was one that came up recently in discussion. So, you know, I'll open it up as your CCMPO rep. I'm in favor of this addition and happy to expound, but I'll go around and take comment.
Yeah, if I may, I'm a big fan of grant specialists. They are worth their weight in gold. They are necessary, absolutely. I appreciate the 75%. Now understanding, of course, it's an April 1st start. My question is, though, only 1 to 2 applications a year is what we're expecting in return from a grant specialist? That seems rather low. I wasn't...
So along with the work on the grants, we have built this position into some of the changes included in our strategic plan. So we're hoping to leverage their expertise, the skill set they bring to the table. If you look through the strategic plan, one of the things we talk about is establishing a projects committee to the MPO. Currently, if there's a funding opportunity, for instance, the transportation alternative set aside, and there's a need to review projects or identify priorities for it, each time that comes up, we set up a subcommittee and have them identify criteria, identify a process to vet the projects, and then report out to the MPO. What we're proposing with this is that we create a standing committee to vet all of those funding programs as they come through. One of the things this position will be doing is serving as primary staff to that committee. We are aware that through PennDOT there are things like software programs to assist in project prioritization and the identification of priorities. We'd want this person to become a staff expert in that so that they can apply it not only to these discretionary programs, but to our other ongoing processes, TA set-asides, the TIP updates, the development of supplemental planning funds applications for the Unified Planning Work Program updates, to support project identification and prioritization for the long-range transportation plan. We also think for this person to really be effective in identifying the projects that are likely to move, the ones that are really likely to succeed, they need to be participating in the project development meetings, the scope and field view meetings. They need to be talking to some of the potential sponsoring partners do the groundwork, learn the opportunities are out there, and see what the needs really are across the county. So it's not just the grants applications, it's the other work that will come with it.
And I think that's part of my, I'll say, concern too, is that the prioritizations are clear though, and that the biggest wins are the things that are being focused on, and not maybe, cleaning out a backlog that might not, really net a lot for COG and for the citizens. That's my concern, is what that prioritization looks like. And it sounds like that committee's going to help inform, I'm sorry, I'm calling them a committee, is going to help inform that prioritization. It's not yet determined what that looks like?
Yes. So one of the things that we've been talking about frequently as we go through this process, you're talking about allocating regional funds to the development of a small number of projects. The process of allocation for those funds, the identification of the priorities, it has to be accessible to all the municipalities across the county, and it has to be transparent. And once it's in place, it has to operate in a transparent, reliable, and repeatable manner. If there's help out there to be had, the potential sponsors need to understand how to get their project in line for this, how to make their submission, and how it's going to be considered. What are the criteria that are going to apply, and how is their project likely to stack up? One of the difficulties with this is that within the bill, there are over 18 major funding programs and a much larger number of smaller funding programs. Every one of them potentially has their own NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability, their own criteria, their own requirements, and their own records of what types of applications succeed. Many of them are, many of them allow grants for design and construction, but seem to favor construction projects. Some of them, like the Safe Streets for All program, clearly favor funding of action plans rather than the funding of the implementation or construction phase of it. This person is going to have to learn those opportunities, sort through the priorities on the tip and the other projects that are identified, because we want to start with that backlog. It's probably not going to stay static over the life of this position. There has to be a way to update those candidates and bring new potential projects to bear.
And I guess from my experience, I just, in a way, caution to my concern is that the burnout rate for a grant specialist that has 1,000 things on their plate, moving back and forth without clear prioritization, really creates a revolving door, and of just next person, next, et cetera, from an HR standpoint. So just something that I wanted to bring up, at least in discussion when I think about HR and what that looks like. So that was all. Thank you.
That's an interesting point.
HR would concur with the gentleman from Ward 1. Turnover could be a lot more costly over time. So we bring in a grant specialist, we want to be able to keep them.
As we kind of discussed before, yes, this is not a permanent model of, this infrastructure money will change in its form at some point, but we expect that a lot of these funds will still be allocated by competitive grants and just different things we have to apply for. So this position likely won't not be needed at some point. So
I agree, and especially for, as you were saying about the active transportation plan here, with microtransit becoming more and more popular, I mean, in my neighborhood, the scooters and the e-bikes and the everything and the connectivity it's just great. I'm excited.
so I'll look for.
I appreciate you being forward-looking in terms of this is a historic opportunity that's come down from the federal government. And I really do hope, one of the things that I have been afraid of as I've been looking at this, that smaller municipalities and rural areas will miss out because we do not have the infrastructure in place in order to compete for these grants like urban areas do. And so I appreciate you putting this forward at this time. I think it is important. My only say would be is that I also worry about how long these opportunities will be available, so making sure that we take advantage of them now as quickly as possible. So I can understand your original ask, I guess is what I'm saying in my comment, in terms of the level of effort I think it would take over the next 2 years to ensure that we're successful while the funding's available. So I guess I'm a little concerned about the reduced amount and our ability to be able to take real advantage of it.
I'm having deja vu. I believe I was actually in a presentation about grants and whatnot recently, but like the grant specialist, it's a critical position because it would, ideally, their success would bring in dollars to our area after we make that initial investment of onboarding them and bringing them in to do that. But it also sounds like there's a lot of legwork too in some of these grants, that it's gonna take that extra person to be able to identify what steps do we need to take to get the grant. Are these steps attainable and so forth?
Yeah. So I'm hearing support for this, and then a comment about increasing the specialist position back to the 12 months. Would there be support for that comment? Or even more, to, to encourage, hiring.
I did not give a specific increase.
No, but to encourage, hiring in the first quarter if possible, maybe. maybe that could be a comment.
Yes, I mean, I would think we would want to get somebody here as soon as possible, and if the delay is just us wanting to save money, to save a very small amount of money, I would say no to that. I would say I would want to get the person here as soon as possible.
Well,
But realistically, you're thinking April might be the earliest we could hire them?
to be honest, yeah, and that was our assessment going into this, that till we go through the mechanics of the job description, posting it and identifying candidates and getting someone onboarded, that is a reasonable guess of where we'll be.
Can I ask another question, not related to the budget part of it? Are you anticipating this person having to work here in person, or are you open to a remote candidate for this particular position?
I think we'd have to be flexible and see what's available within the market. Again, having just spoken earlier about the importance of being able to get this person out in the field and to see some of the projects, that makes it hard to say, well, yes, we can entertain someone who is 100% virtual. But as we go through this, I think there will be a lot of pressure from all the members of COG to make effective decisions to move this forward, and if we're going to make this investment, to return a result. So getting caught up in a detail like that would not be the most productive way of working through the process.
I bring that up because that is probably my biggest concern for you, is finding an individual. This being a part of my work life, I know how difficult it is to find folks in this field, in this area, despite the fact we have a major university here. You would think it would be easier because of that, but it is not. And so a lot of functions that once required in-person personnel at Penn State related to grants and contracts have become remote positions, just because we weren't able, it was increasingly challenging to find people, and what you're saying was true. We would hire people from other fields and then train them. We'd train them so well that they would go take jobs at other universities. And so that's the other danger, right, in bringing somebody in that we're training ourselves. So I guess I'm just caution to balance that, right? Because if you can hire someone who has some experience remotely versus hiring somebody locally that you have to train up, I'm leaning towards getting the person with experience, just given the speed at which I think you'll need to act.
Appreciate it.
And if I may, just kind of pulling on that thread a bit too, I'm wondering, have we considered maybe leaning on the consultant for the first quarter of next year to fill the gap before somebody comes in? And what would that look like? Because if I'm thinking $30,000 a month for a consultant to help lay some track for somebody to come in, maybe that does fill the gap, or at least gets the person on site up and running sooner.
So I think we've been looking at something similar conceptually, but where our conversation has been with that is that if we get to a point, say April, where we don't have viable candidates and our hiring process isn't moving forward, that's a point where I think I would come back with a recommendation and then a request that we reprioritize the funding available to be able to support a more consultant-driven process. Again, we're giving up some of the synergies that come with this, the ability to build that person into our process. I can write a contract for a consultant to come out with me to Rush Township to do field view meetings. It's probably not going to be very cost effective. So it's not my first choice. But if what we're trying to do is build a program that allows us to show the effectiveness of this approach and then continue to build on success, again, I think if we get to, say, April and we don't have a viable candidate for a staff-driven approach, then we would come back to it and look at reseating the position or reformatting the approach so that we're leaning more heavily on consultant support. I think once this is improved, the imperative is going to be to go out there to identify viable projects that are great subjects for a successful application, and then get those applications in.
Okay, so I'm seeing consensus on support for this. And then just back to Corey's point really quick, I'll just touch on that. In the strategic plan process, we did really focus a lot on those smaller municipalities, outreach to them, having them feel engaged and included in the MPO. And so I think there's a lot of things built into that strategic plan that are really going to assist with that, with connecting with those smaller municipalities around the county. All right, so I think we're ready to move on. Thanks so much, Jim. Thank you. Okay, so we will move to the administration, and that increase is class and compensation. So, yes, please.
I do have one question, because I noticed that the other receipts and fees is $100,000 less than the budget from last year, and I just wondered what that change was.
So in the administration budget,
Yes.
let's see. I'm not sure. Jennifer, do you have that off the top of your head? The decrease in, or excuse me, not Jennifer. Yeah, sorry. Kimberly, yes. Not positive. Let's see. I'll have to get back to you on that. I'm sorry. With the summary, I don't have all the detail with me tonight.
Okay. It's a bit of a double whammy, right? Because, we're increasing because of the compensation, but at the same time, the revenue went down $100,000, so it's making the gap even larger there than it.
The one thing I can think of off the top of my head, but I'll have to double check, is that we transferred money in last year from other funds to cover the classification compensation study and so on. So it may be that we just, those studies are all done, and so the transfers in are reduced, but I'll have to check.
Other thoughts on admin? Nature Center operating. That's not that different than last year. The big increase was last year from 2022. That doubled, I think. And Active Adult Center.
Our share is less this year. in the
Mhm.
Adult Center. Does that mean we have fewer active?
I mean, that's a usage formula, so I can,
I feel a little bad about that.
yeah, I can let Eric speak to that.
Not too long ago, Bill said there was a lot of people showing up at the Nature Center. I mean, at the Active Adult Center.
Well, I think the numbers are up in terms of participation, utilization. Christy's on, if you want her to try to respond to that real quick.
Hi there. Participation at the AAC is certainly increasing. I know Ferguson Township participation is relatively high as well at the AAC. We continue to struggle to have an adequate staff to participant ratio, which is part of the reason why we had put forward that staff assistant position to help fill that need. We continue to grow. Programming continues to grow out there, and so the needs and the demands are getting heavier and heavier as we continue from pre-COVID numbers to current year. We're starting to creep back up beyond expectations that keeping up and keeping pace has been a challenge.
Thanks very much. Let's see, and up next is SCLO Library Operating. Comments, yes.
Just it's a large increase for us in particular. Is part of that compensation too? And okay, getting nods that part of it's
Part of
compensation.
that relates to implementation of the compensation study, but also withdrawal of Half Moon Township that shifts some of their costs to the other municipalities. Even though there's some offset from the foundation to soften that, there is some small impact on the other municipalities. And again, Lisa Collins, library director, is here if you need any additional help on that.
And I think, generally speaking, that was the explanation we had at the Finance Committee about that. If there's other questions on that.
I'm doubly sad about the timing of Half Moon withdrawing.
Mhm. Yeah, and there are some services that were provided out there that won't be provided anymore, so that would, work itself out a little bit, but hopefully those will be picked up elsewhere around the region, so, need to comment?
It is a significant cost, but understanding the reports that are brought forward on the library, this is a service that our residents heavily use. So the money that we're investing in this is adding value and giving back to our residents in a good way.
And I'll share from the presentation, the Finance Committee, in forming their budget, they were really mindful of delaying some things that they could delay, knowing that they were increasing because of the class and compensation study and Half Moon's withdrawal. So they were really cognizant of that and made note throughout the presentation. It's also based on our usage, so that's great that, if we have usage increase, but, the library serves a unique function. And so I am, very pleased to support that in there. And kind of like with COG and Fire working out their employee share, the library is really doing some unique revenue generating things, and so we got to hear a little bit about some of those, test proctoring and offering notary services. There are just some really creative things, and as that institution there, to really offer these services, for the community. I think they have tutoring, for they work with SCASD on, so it's a really, you just can't even imagine the breadth of services offered over there. So
And the lunches they served over the summer, that's amazing.
yeah,
No, I appreciate the increase. There is also an increase in other receipts and fees in the budget for this coming year as well to offset some costs, so I
Yeah.
appreciate that as well.
yeah. Okay, so if there's nothing else on that, items under capital, we have the Parks capital, Fire capital, COG building capital, Nature Center capital, Pulse capital, and School Library capital. Any comments on any of those? And then just regional parks. Other comments? And we can go back up. So our total increase in our percentage increase is an increase of 9.45%, not including CCMPO additions. So above the guideline. I guess just again, I'd restate that comment of really looking at the prioritization, building in those items first, and we had talked about some of the park staffing. So, any other comments from the board, questions for Mr. Nuremberg while he's standing here? Did you have any, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I guess a prognostication potentially of our future discussions. I mean, I can see, given that we have the smallest increase in our share for the way the budget's set up, that there might be some way to get us to 8%. But I'm gonna guess it's going to be a struggle to get some of the other municipalities to 8%. Without serious changes. I don't know if I have a question embedded in that.
Well, I think that's, essentially we had a status quo budget presented initially that was going to be the guideline. It was going to be at the cap before adding anything. And so I think this is adding items. We are adding staffing. I would even take the class and compensation study out of it. That was approved separately. So even if you take that out of it, this is an expansion in some ways. And so I think that's what I would want the finance committee to really look at, and the separate committees, because if there's something proposed or suggested, that all adds up. If, it would be nice to have a study for this, and what if we look into this over here, that comes back to staff and back up through finance, and then it gets added. And so I think sometimes those things can take on a life of their own, just even through the committee process. So I think addressing it through finance, through committees, with this particular budget, I think we still have things in here. I would point to, I think we talked about the park item. I think there was maybe one other item, but beyond that, there just isn't that much that isn't already embedded in here. And so probably starting with that status quo budget next year and then building from that may be the only way to kind of keep it in check. So, but if this is the direction that General Forum, our board wants to go, then we do just have to consider how we'll pay for it. So, because those costs will not stop increasing. So, so that's that. I would say, I know that some of the delay was in calculating, and this would be maybe one other comment, was in calculating the guideline for this year. And so I would suggest just using the 8% as a ballpark and working off of that, since that's been the guideline for the past couple years before. And it was noted last year in budget discussions that that had been the cap when there previously was a cap, that it was about 8%. So I think just generally using that to be able to move forward with budget preparation, because it was not smooth, this year. And I know we had staffing issues and different things, but it was difficult to keep track of the changes as we moved through it. So I think just starting out with an acknowledged estimate of an 8%, that's an estimate. So, and the municipalities essentially have to do that as well. They have to estimate when they're putting their budgets together too. So I think working off of that would be one way to smooth out the process a little bit next year. So I think yes, go ahead, please.
So I was just going to note that one of the things that the Finance Committee plans to do at their December meeting is talk about improvements to the process. Any of the suggestions that come through the municipal comment process, you're third on the list, and there's 3 more to go. So any of the comments that come from the other municipalities along with Ferguson will be considered by the Finance Committee during their December meeting to think about things to improve the process for 2020, during 24 for fiscal year 2025. We appreciate the support for the MPO item, and so generally we're looking for support for the summary budget, subject to your comments that have been listed that I'm sure will be provided on schedule, and just to make sure we're all on the same page with that, because the next steps in the process will be to go to the Finance Committee, then Executive Committee in general form at the end of this month. That way, an adopted summary budget can then be provided back to the municipality so you can adopt your budgets on schedule in December, or November, in the case of yours.
Thanks, and I think that makes a good point. I think just to kind of generalize some of our extraneous comments too, I think just to say we're supportive of looking at the 8% cap and staying within that. This budget goes above that. So that's still a lift for us, is to meet that increase. And so there are items in here that are above and beyond the status quo that we didn't discuss. They were embedded in here. So the only one we were discussing was CCMPO. And so I think however we can look at bringing that back down to the 8%, I would be supportive of. So I would propose that as a comment.
Yeah.
And then if there's,
And I think too, that at some point it cannot just be not doing new things, right? That potentially there are things that we do as a regional government that we will have to cut in order to fund the areas that are priorities for us. It seems unsustainable right now, the growth.
well, I think that's a great point, because this 8% isn't, that was the cap, but that hasn't always been what's been moved forward. It hasn't always been that large of an increase year over year. And so that's a large increase. And so I think, acknowledging that should be the maximum. That was the idea of the guideline of the cap. That should be where it's at. And some municipalities are still at, I'm on the wrong one now, but 13%, a number of them were around 12, 13%. And so it doesn't help to have the cap if we're always going to be way beyond it. And so I think bringing that back down and working within that.
I was gonna say, didn't the municipal managers last year sound the alarm when the initial numbers that came out as to whether or not what was being proposed was even sustainable with their own budgets?
Yeah, and that was when it was at an 18% increase. And so, and I think
definitely thank the managers for
yeah.
that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that, that really directed the conversation and brought us back to the place where we could discuss putting that cap back on. And, now, I wouldn't be surprised. I would assume that some municipalities would have an issue with their, larger than 8% increase. And so we'll see what comes back. But again, that was to be the cap, this guideline to work within that. And so I think the meaning of that was maybe lost.
It's painful to see some of these numbers of increases, because I can tell you there are working people that are not seeing that much of an increase in their paycheck. Some of us are even seeing nothing increases. We're talking about spending of taxpayer dollars. Money doesn't grow on trees. They're not growing on taxpayers in some cases either.
So again, we have the guideline, we have this list of prioritization elements that we can look at when we're trying to build this budget. And so I guess that would be the comment, again, I think it's just kind of rehashing the same comment, keep at the cap and, look at the priorities that were identified. So it's, so I would say that if there's any other comment from the board, I'll let Mr. Norenberg sit down. I'll go to public comment. Okay, if there's anyone in the room with public comment, I'll invite you up, and if not, we'll go to Zoom participants. If there's anyone on Zoom who'd like to make a comment, you can raise your digital hand. We'll give everyone a minute.
Bill initially had a comment. Brad indicated.
And I'm not seeing any online comment, so we can go ahead, and I think the manager will probably want a motion to forward these comments.
Yes, Madam Chair, there's a recommended motion in the agenda, and I've taken notes this evening, and as usual, I'll likely look to the CNET just to do a double check, and staff will assist, and we'll get this over to Mr. Nordenberg prior to the date and time, as requested.
This is Corey. I move that the Board of Supervisors direct the Township Manager to forward its comments on the draft 2024 COG summary budget to the COG Executive Director.
This is Patty, I'll second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. All right, thanks very much. And thanks everyone from COG for attending, for participating. That was very, very helpful and appreciated. Okay, I believe we're up to zoning variance. Okay. So we'll move to zoning variance for 4201 West Whitehall Road, and we'll go to Ms. Wargo.
All right. On September 28th, 2023, Patty Hartle submitted an application for a variance hearing at 4201 West Whitehall Road. This is the Fairbrook United Methodist Church. The property is zoned single-family residential, and the applicant is requesting a variance from the 50-foot use buffer found in 277013 and 277013I to not have to conduct a detailed study to determine the floodplain elevation and complete a letter of map revision to change the floodplain designation from a Zone A to a Zone AE. Recommended motion from staff is that the Board of Supervisors remain neutral in this request.
All right, thank you. Questions or comments on this? Any discussion? Yep, go ahead.
I just know, speaking with some parishioners out there, they're excited about this idea. You know, it's a shame that the roof wasn't able to be utilized, but I think this is a great thing, and I know even local clergy are curious about what they're going to be doing out there. So, looking forward to it.
Other comment? Okay, I'm not seeing any. If there's no other discussion, anyone would like to make the motion?
Yeah, this is Matt. I'll make a motion that the Board of Supervisors, that we move that the Board of Supervisors remain neutral on this topic.
Is there a second?
This is Patty, I'll second.
All right, any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. All right, thank you. And thanks, Jenna. Okay, we'll move to communications to the board. And we'll go around.
Oh, well, that's funny, because I feel like I was flooded with communication. So, let's see, I had one regarding Suburban Park and maybe looking at our master plan. And they were concerned about really is a horseshoe pit really something that we want in Suburban Park? So I had let's see, and then also I had an email about an incident that was reported on Nextdoor, which I think is some sort of social media platform.
Yeah.
And inquiring about an incident that occurred. Referred that to the township manager who addressed that. I also had a communication regarding the traffic signal at Sandy Drive and Science Park Road and the status of that. And then I also had a discussion and communication with somebody regarding, I guess you would consider it a code enforcement issue about a motorhome being parked on a street and being used as an apartment. So, those were my.
I had a communication from a resident over in Pine Grove Mills pertaining to bulk pickup, an issue with that, which was forwarded on to staff, and then making its way over to Mr. Thompson for the climate action.
I had nothing.
Okay. I had a number of the same ones that Patty did, one on the budget, one on the agendas where they're posted, and I'll just note that there is really helpful information on the township website about how to access the agendas that are part of our new agenda software. And one on a unleashed dog issue that I forwarded. And I think that was it. Is there anything else to cover this evening? And if there is nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved, this is Patty.
And I will second, and we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know how hard it is to adjourn a meeting when you're not here?